The church was too quiet for a wedding, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls and made every heartbeat sound like thunder. Isabella Torres stood at the altar, her fingers cold despite the warmth of the candles burning on both sides. She could hear the echo of her own pulse, fast, nervous, uneven. This wasn't how she had imagined marriage. Not like this, not with a man she barely knew. Her mind kept whispering the same words over and over, as if clinging to them would make them true. He can't please a woman. You'll be safe. Safe. What a strange word to describe the moment when her entire life was being signed away in front of God and strangers. Daman Ikale stood across from her, tall and impossibly composed. His black suit fit him like it had been made from silence itself, sharp, cold, and flawless. He didn't fidget. He didn't smile. He just watched her, his dark eyes steady, unreadable, and far too calm for a man about to take a wife. Isabella felt her knees weaken when their gazes met. The air seemed to tighten, almost crackle. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. Dominic's eyes weren't the eyes of a broken man. They were sharp, alive, holding something deep and dangerous beneath the surface. The kind of look that could undo a person without a single word. The priest's voice faded in and out, a soft hum under the pounding in her ears. She repeated her vows in a voice that didn't sound like her own. The word "I do" slipped from her lips, thin as breath, and the sound felt final, like a door closing. When Dominic reached for her hand to slide the ring onto her finger, his touch startled her. His skin was warm, too warm. His fingers wrapped around hers with deliberate steadiness, a touch that was neither rushed nor uncertain. It should have been simple, a symbolic gesture, nothing more. But the moment his skin met hers, a spark ran up her arm, quick as Cindy Kindle, and unwelcome. She swallowed hard. Her heart stuttered. The rumor echoed again, desperate now. He can't please a woman. You'll be safe. But that touch didn't feel like safety. It felt like danger wrapped in control. Dominic's face didn't move, but his thumb brushed against her knuckle before he released her hand. It was such a small thing. It could have been an accident. Yet her breath caught. She glanced up, and for the briefest second, she thought she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Heat, curiosity, or maybe recognition. Whatever it wasn't emptiness. It wasn't the look of a man incapable of feeling. The priest pronounced them husband and wife, and polite applause followed. People smiled. Isabella tried to return the gesture, but her lips trembled. She looked at Dominic again. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, but his eyes didn't soften. They walked down the aisle side by side, his arm steady beneath hers. She could feel the strength hidden under his restraint, every step measured, every breath calculated. The scent of him, clean, subtle, expensive, wrapped around her, dizzying. When they reached the church doors, sunlight flooded in, bathing everything in gold. Dominic stopped for a moment before stepping out, turning slightly toward her. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, rich, calm. It was the first time he had spoken to her all morning. "Yes," she lied. He nodded once, his gaze lingering on her for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Good. That single word carried weight she couldn't define. As they stepped into the waiting car, the whisper in her mind began to crumble. Every glance, every controlled movement, every quiet breath from the man beside her felt too intense to belong to someone incapable of passion. When he helped her into the seat, his hand brushed her back, light, respectful, but the warmth stayed long after the contact was gone. Isabella looked out the window, heart racing, her reflection trembling in the glass. He can't please a woman, they had said. But as the car pulled away, and Dominic's reflection appeared beside hers, sharp and dark and undeniably alive, one question began to rise above all the others. What if the rumor was a lie? The limousine moved through the quiet streets of the city, while the world outside turned into a blur of gold and gray. But inside the car, everything felt too still, too close. Isabella sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, pretending to admire the city lights through the tinted window. She could feel Dominic beside her, motionless, silent, like a shadow made of glass. He hadn't spoken since the church, only once had his hand brushed hers when he helped her inside the car, and even now her skin still tingled where he touched her. The rumor echoed in her mind like a broken melody. He can't please a woman. You'll be safe. But what kind of safe felt like this? What kind of man who could not love made her pulse race every time he looked her way? They arrived at the grand hall for the reception. The air smelled of roses and champagne. The crowd erupted in polite applause when they entered. Dominic placed a hand on her lower back, guiding her forward. The gesture was careful, but not detached. There was possession in the way his fingers rested there, as though he were making a quiet claim without a word. People whispered as they passed the billionaire groom and the desperate bride. The story was already spreading. The poor girl saved by a cold man. The beautiful wife married to someone who couldn't give her what other men could. Isabella smiled for the cameras, but her smile was made of glass. She could feel Dominic's calm presence beside her, his silence louder than all the whispers. During dinner, he sat close, but not touching. He asked about her favorite wine, her childhood, her work at her father's vineyard. His tone was polite, but his eyes never left hers. They were dark and searching, as if he were studying. Or trying to understand who she really was, or maybe testing how long she could hold his gaze without trembling. When the guests raised their glasses, Dominic stood and spoke, his voice smooth, deep, certain. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said. "We don't celebrate love here. We celebrate loyalty." The room went still. Loyalty, not love. That single word settled like smoke in the air, and when he sat again, Isabella dared to glance at him. She saw it then, the faintest curl at the corner of his lips. Not quite a smile, more like a secret. Later, when the music began, he offered his hand. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed her palm against his. The warmth that met her skin made her forget to breathe as they moved across the floor. Dominic led her with effortless control, his movements precise but never harsh. She realized he wasn't following the rhythm of the music. He was following the rhythm of her pulse. "You dance well," she whispered, surprised by how natural it felt. He leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear. "I do everything well." The words were quiet, but they burned through her defenses. She tried to laugh, but it came out soft, shaky. A flicker of fear and fascination mixed together. As the night ended, Dominic escorted her to the car again, the guests fading behind them. When the door shut and silence filled the space once more, he finally spoke in that low, calm voice of his. "Our agreement begins tonight." Isabella turned to him, uncertain. "You'll move into my house tomorrow. The staff will handle your belongings. The first year is all that's required. After that, you'll be free." His words should have brought relief, but instead they hollowed her chest. She studied his face for any sign of cruelty, but there was none. Only control and something else. Something unspoken. When the car stopped before the hotel, she stepped out. Her heels clicking on marble, she turned to thank him, but the words froze on her lie. Dominic stood under the pale lights watching her, his eyes unreadable, his expression calm, yet something in his gaze made her heart twist. Then he said quietly, "You should rest. It's going to be a long night." "A long night," she repeated silently as the elevator doors closed behind her, the reflection of his face fading from the polished steel. What did he mean by that? She didn't know yet, but deep inside her fear was slowly turning into something far more dangerous. Curiosity. The morning after the wedding felt like a dream that refused to fade. Isabella woke in the hotel suite alone. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting the room in shades of gold. The sheets still carried a faint trace of his scent, clean and subtle, like rain on stone. She sat up, pressing a hand to her chest. Her heart was still racing, though she didn't know why. Dominic Hale hadn't touched her, not once, and yet his presence seemed to linger in the air, heavy, invisible, unshakable. She showered, dressed, and tried to steady her thoughts, but every moment from the night before replayed in fragments. His voice, his hands guiding her on the dance floor, the promise in his tone when he said you should rest. It's going to be a long night. She had expected him to come to her door. She had waited, pretending she wouldn't care if he did, but he never came. Instead, she had fallen asleep to the sound of distant thunder and the strange ache of disappointment. By noon, a car arrived to take her to the Hale estate. She expected something modern and cold, like the man himself, but the mansion that rose before her was older than she imagined. Stone walls covered in ivy, large windows framed by wrought iron balconies. It was beautiful but lonely, a place that seemed to breathe history and silence. Dominic was waiting at the entrance dressed in black. Again his tie undone, his eyes unreadable. "Welcome home," he said, his tone calm. But his gaze lingered on her too long for politeness. She tried to smile. "Thank you, it's more than I expected." He gestured for her to follow him inside the hall stretched endlessly. Chandeliers hung from carved ceilings. Portraits lined the walls, men and women with the same sharp features, the same guarded eyes. She wondered which of them had taught Dominic how to hide everything behind control. As they walked deeper into the house, she noticed how quiet it was. No laughter, no voices, only the faint echo of their footsteps. He opened a door, revealing a grand room filled with light. "This will be your space," he said. "The staff will make sure you have everything you need." She glanced around and then asked softly, "And what about you?" His expression didn't change. "I'll be in my wing, his wing." The words sounded cold and final. She nodded, pretending she didn't care, pretending that was what she wanted. But when she looked up, she caught something in his eyes, a shadow of hesitation, as if he wanted to say more but stopped himself. That evening she wandered through the garden, unable to shake the feeling that something was hidden beneath the surface of this place. The fountain in the center was cracked vines crawling over marble statues, and somewhere from the upper floor she could feel his eyes on her. She turned quickly, but saw no one. Still, her skin prickled as if his gaze had touched her. As night fell, she returned to her room and found a box on the bed. Inside lay a simple silver bracelet. No note, no explanation. Just the delicate metal glinting in the soft light. She slipped it onto her wrist. Instinctively, it fit perfectly. Then she noticed small initials engraved inside, DH for Dominic Hale. Her heart skipped. He had thought of her. But why? A knock sounded at the door. Soft, deliberate. Her breath caught before she could answer. The door opened slowly. Dominic stood there without a tie, the top buttons of his shirt undone, his expression unreadable. He stepped inside without a word, closing the door behind him. The air shifted heavy electric. "I didn't mean to disturb." You?" he said, his voice lower than usual. "You didn't?" she replied, barely above a whisper. He looked around, then back at her. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable." "I am," she lied. He nodded once. "Good, because this house has too many ghosts." She frowned. "Ghosts?" He smiled faintly. "Not the kind you imagine." Then his gaze dropped to the bracelet, and for the first time she saw something raw flicker in his eyes. "You found it," he said softly. "Yes, it's beautiful. Thank you." "It belonged to my mother," he said quietly. "She never took it off until the day she died." The silence that followed was thick with something neither of them could name. He stepped closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His voice dropped when he spoke again. "You shouldn't wear it if you don't want to be part of the story." She looked up, confused. "What story?" He held her gaze, the one that ruined everything. And before she could ask what he meant, he turned and walked out, leaving her standing there alone with the bracelet glowing like a secret against her skin and a new fear curling inside her. What if the ghosts in this house weren't the only ones haunting him? What if he was one of them? The storm began before midnight. Thunder rolled over the hills like an angry voice, shaking the windows of the old Hale mansion. Isabella sat by the fire in her room, unable to sleep. The bracelet on her wrist felt heavier tonight, its silver glow catching every flash of lightning. She kept thinking about his words from the evening before. "You shouldn't wear it if you don't want to be part of the story." What story? What did he mean? Rain lashed against the glass. The power flickered once, twice, and then everything went black. Silence pressed down, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the beating of her heart. She stood up carefully, calling out hello, but her voice disappeared into the darkness. A moment later, she heard slow, deliberate footsteps in the corridor. Her breath caught, the door creaked open and a shadow filled the frame. Dominic's voice came low and calm. "It's just the storm. The power lines are down." She exhaled relief, flooding her chest. I thought he moved closer, flashlight in hand, the beam of light cutting across the room and stopping on her face. You shouldn't wander around in the dark, he said. It's easy to get lost in this house. She noticed then that his hair was damp, raindrops still clinging to his collar, and the faint smell of smoke and rain followed him. He set the flashlight on the table, its light softening the edges of his face. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked human, tired. Even he glanced at the bracelet on her wrist again, his eyes darkening when he saw it. You kept it? Yes, she said quietly. It felt wrong to take it off. His jaw tightened for a heartbeat, then he nodded. Fine, keep it, but if anyone asks where you got it, tell them I gave it to you. Why? She asked, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the window, watching the storm outside as if it had answers he wasn't ready to say. Lightning illuminated the room, and for a brief second his reflection appeared in the glass, tall, motionless and tense, like a man standing guard over a battlefield. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. My mother died in this house the night she wore that bracelet. She was wearing it when they found her. Isabella froze, her fingers tightening around the silver band. I'm sorry, she whispered. He turned to her, eyes shadowed. Don't be. It wasn't an accident. She wanted to ask more, but he looked away, the muscles in his jaw moving like he was fighting old ghosts. Something about the way he said it wasn't an accident made her blood run cold. Thunder crashed again, louder this time. The lights flickered and came back on. Dominic sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's late, he said. You should sleep. I'll make sure the generator keeps running. She nodded, still shaken. He walked toward the door but paused before leaving, his voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes the dead have a strange way of reminding us we owe them the truth. The door closed behind him, leaving her alone again. The fire crackled low, its light dancing across the silver bracelet. Isabella stared at it for a long time until something caught her eye on the inside of the metal near the engraving. There was a faint scratch, shaped like the letter M. She frowned, tracing it with her thumb. It hadn't been there before. A sound came from outside her window, faint but clear, like footsteps on wet gravel. She moved toward the glass, parting the curtain. The storm had calmed to a drizzle. The garden below was empty, or so she thought, until lightning flashed again, and for one brief moment, she saw someone standing by the fountain, a tall figure watching the house before vanishing into the dark. Her heart pounded. She stepped back quickly, whispering his name. Dominic. But there was no answer. Only silence. The kind of silence that makes you realize you're not alone, even when you can't see who else is there. And for the first time since the wedding, Isabella understood why the mansion felt alive. Some ghosts didn't belong to the dead. They belonged to the living. Morning came with fog, thick and heavy, rolling over the hills until it swallowed the garden. Whole, Isabella hadn't slept. The image of the shadow near the fountain kept replaying in her mind. She tried to convince herself it was just the storm, just her imagination, but the unease refused to fade. She went downstairs hoping for distraction, but the mansion felt different now, quieter, colder, as if something unseen was listening. In the dining room, Dominic sat alone reading the newspaper, a cup of black coffee untouched beside him. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. Good morning, she said, her voice uncertain. He nodded. Good morning. Did you sleep well? She hesitated. Yes, a lie. He folded the paper carefully, his fingers steady, too steady. Then his eyes moved to her wrist, where the silver bracelet glimmered. In the pale light. You saw something last night, didn't you? He asked. She froze. What do you mean? His gaze didn't waver. The storm, the footsteps, the figure in the garden. You saw it, didn't you? She opened her mouth to deny it, but the truth slipped out. Yes, I think I did. He leaned back in his chair, the faintest sigh escaping him. Then it's begun. It's begun, she repeated, confused. Begun? What? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and motioned for her to follow. Come with me. I want to show you something. They walked through a corridor lined with portraits and stopped before a locked door at the end. Dominic took a key from his pocket, unlocked it and pushed it open, revealing a dim room filled with old photographs and dusty boxes. It smelled of wood smoke and memory. This was my mother's room, he said quietly. Isabella stepped inside. Carefully on the wall hung a single large portrait of a woman, beautiful and sad, wearing the same bracelet that now circled Isabella's wrist. Dominic watched her face. She was the heart of this house until the night she died. His voice was calm but distant, like he was reciting something he'd said too many times. They said it was an accident. She slipped near the fountain, hit her head and drowned, but that's not what happened. A chill ran through Isabella. What did happen? His eyes darkened. Someone pushed her, she gasped. Who? He turned toward the window, his reflection pale against the morning fog. I never found out, but I have a good idea. He paused, then looked at her. My brother. The name hung in the air like poison. She remembered the email she'd once glimpsed in his office. The threat, the name, Marcus, she whispered. Dominic nodded. Yes, Marcus spread the rumor about me too. Said I was incapable of being a man. He smiled bitterly. It was easier for the world to believe that than to ask what really happened that night. Isabella's mind raced. You think he killed her? I know he did, Domini. C said, but I can't prove it, not yet. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a faded envelope. Inside was a torn letter written in elegant handwriting. Her mother's. My dearest Dominic. It began. If anything happens to me, remember that the truth lies beneath the garden. Beneath the garden, she repeated softly. Dominic nodded. When the workers rebuilt the fountain after her death, they sealed something inside. Something she wanted hidden until the right time. He turned to Isabella, his eyes steady. I think that time is now. A knock echoed suddenly from the hall, sharp and impatient. Dominic stiffened. Marcus. His voice dropped. He wasn't supposed to be here yet. Stay behind me. Isabella's pulse quickened. Footsteps approached the doorway before the door swung open, revealing a man with the same sharp jaw and cold blue eyes as Dominic, but without the warmth of restraint. Well, brother, Marcus drawled, smiling too easily. You didn't tell me you'd brought home such a beautiful wife. Isabella felt Dominic tense beside her. His voice dropped like ice. Leave her out of this. Marcus laughed. Out of what? I just came to congratulate you. Or maybe warn her. She's married a man who lives among ghosts. He leaned closer, his smile turning cruel. Careful, sister. He can't love you the way a real man can. Before Isabella could react, Dominic stepped forward, his hand closing around Marcus's collar, his voice low and deadly. Say that again, Marcus smirked, or what you'll lose control in front of your new bride. Isabella's heart pounded as the brothers stared at each other, the air thick with old hatred. Then Marcus whispered softly, You still don't understand, do you? Some secrets were meant to stay buried beneath the garden. He smiled and walked out, leaving silence behind. Dominic's hands trembled just slightly. He turned to Isabella, eyes burning with a mix of rage and sorrow. He knows something, she said. He nodded. Yes, and now he'll make sure we regret finding out what it is. She touched his arm gently. What are we going to do? He looked at her, then toward the garden where the fog sea. Med to move like breath. We dig, Isabella, he said quietly. We dig until we know the truth, even if it destroys everything. The night returned with a weight that pressed against every wall of the mansion. Thunder rolled in the distance again, though no storm was forecasted. Isabella stood by her window, staring out at the dark outline of the garden, her breath fogging the glass. Dominic hadn't said a word all evening after his brother left, only silence, his face unreadable as he poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared into nothing. Now, hours later, she found herself unable to stay in her room any longer. Curiosity and fear pulled at her. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped into the hallway. The air was colder than before, heavy with the smell of rain, though it hadn't fallen yet. The old grandfather clock in the corridor ticked softly, each sound sharp, like a heartbeat. She followed it down the stairs toward the back doors that led to the garden. She paused when she saw Dominic already there, standing in the doorway, shirt sleeves rolled up, shovel in hand. The faint orange glow from the lantern made him look otherworldly. He turned slowly, his eyes catching hers. I told you to stay inside, he said quietly. She stepped closer. I couldn't. You shouldn't be out here alone. Neither should you, she replied. For a long moment, they said nothing. Only the wind answered whispering through the trees. Then Dominic handed her a second lantern. If we're going to find the truth, we find it together." She nodded silently and followed him out into the wet grass. The garden was still cloaked in fog, the fountain at its center gleaming like pale marble bones under the moonlight. Dominic began to dig at the edge of the fountain, each strike of the shovel cutting through mud and stone. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Isabella couldn't tell. The rhythm of the digging became hypnotic until the shovel hit something hay. Or Dominic froze his breath uneven again. He knelt, brushing away soil with his bare hands until a small rusted box appeared. Buried beneath the roots, he looked up at her. "Ready?" She nodded. He opened it slowly. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with red ribbon stained with water and age, and a small locket engraved with the same initials carved inside her bracelet. D.H. Dominic's hand trembled as he picked up the first letter. It was addressed to Evelyn Hale, his mother. The handwriting was elegant but rushed. "Dearest Evelyn, if he ever finds this, you must run. Marcus knows about the fund. He knows the child isn't his. He will come for you." Dominic stopped reading, his eyes going wide. "The child," he whispered. The letters slipped from his hands, scattered across the mud. Isabella bent to pick one up, her pulse pounding as she read the last line written in a desperate scrawl. "Take care of Dominic. He is the only one who carries my blood." Her heart stopped. Dominic's voice broke the silence. "That isn't possible. Marcus is older. He was the heir." Isabella's voice trembled. "Dominic, your mother was writing to warn you. Marcus isn't your brother. He's your father." The world seemed to tilt. Dominic stepped back, shaking his head. "No," he said, barely audible. "No, that's not true." But the truth was there, in the ink, the dates, the tone, the desperation. His mother had been having an affair. She'd been running from the man who now stood in their house, pretending to be family. Before they could speak again, a sharp crack echoed through the air, the sound of a branch snapping, or maybe something worse. Dominic grabbed her arm. "Stay close," he whispered. They moved back toward the mansion, but before reaching the door, a figure emerged from the shadows. Marcus, his voice calm but filled with venom. "Well, it seems the past likes to dig itself up, doesn't it?" He held a gun, not pointed yet, but heavy in his hand. Dominic's body tensed. He stepped in front of Isabella. Marcus smirked. "How touching. Always protecting what doesn't belong to you. Mother always said. You wow." "You're her favorite?" His tone turned bitter. "Maybe that's why she had to die." Isabella gasped. "You killed her." Marcus tilted his head. "I cleaned up her mess. She wanted to expose me, ruin the family name." He looked at Dominic. "You were just a child, but you saw, didn't you? You saw me that night?" Dominic's face went pale, his hands curling into fists. "I remember the fountain," he whispered. "You pushed her." Marcus smiled like a man proud of his sin. The air crackled with tension. The gun lifted. Dominic took a step forward, his voice steady. "Let her go. She has nothing to do with this." Marcus laughed. "Neither did your mother, but she got in the way." He aimed the gun directly at Dominic's chest, and the sound that followed split the night like thunder. Isabella screamed as Dominic fell to his knees, clutching his side. Blood blooming through his shirt, the gun clattered to the ground. Marcus stumbled backward, stunned by his own action before fleeing into the fog. Isabella dropped beside Dominic, her hands pressing against the wound, his eyes locked on hers, pain and defiance mixing in his gaze. "Find the rest," he rasped. "The truth isn't buried yet." Then his body went still. The rain finally began to fall, washing away the dirt and blood, mixing them together into something that looked almost like the earth trying to hide its secrets again. But it was too late. The truth had already been unearthed, and nothing would ever be the same. The sound of rain mixed with the sirens that never came. Isabella knelt beside Dominic, her hands shaking, covered in his blood. The coldness of the night pressed against her skin. He was breathing shallowly, eyes fluttering between pain and darkness. "Stay with me," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "You can't leave me now." His lips curved faintly, his voice barely a breath. "I told you, the truth isn't buried yet." Then his eyes closed and everything went silent. She screamed for help until her voice broke, but the mansion stood lifeless. The servants had vanished. The world outside seemed to hold its breath. She dragged him inside, inch by inch, leaving a trail of crimson across the marble floor. She didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe fear, maybe love, but she refused to let him die. She found the phone in the hall, but the line was dead. The storm had destroyed it again. Her mind raced. She tore open drawers, searching for anything to stop the bleeding. Finally, she found a first aid box in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth against the wound. His pulse was weak, but still there. "Please, God," she whispered, "don't take him, not like this." When she looked at his face, pale against the flickering candlelight, she saw the man who had terrified her at first, but now all she could see was the man who had saved her from lies. Hours passed. She didn't move from his side when dawn finally crept through the windows. The rain had stopped. Dominic stirred, his voice hoarse. "Where's Marcus gone?" she said quietly. His eyes darkened, not far enough. She tried to smile through the exhaustion. "I thought I lost you. You almost did," he said, "but I'm not that easy to kill." He tried to stand, but pain forced him back. She helped him sit against the wall, his breath uneven. "We need to end this," he said softly. "He'll come back for what's in that box, and he'll kill anyone who stands in his way." Isabella felt her heart clench. "What's left in there?" "Letters," he said. His mother mentioned a key. It must unlock whatever she was protecting. That evening, Dominic insisted they return to the garden. Despite his wound, the doctor from the nearby village had bandaged him, but he refused to rest. His determination frightened and amazed her. The fog had returned thick, like smoke. He carried the rusted box again, holding it close. They reached the fountain, the earth still torn from the nigh. Before Dominic crouched slowly, using one hand to steady himself, and began digging again. This time more carefully. After a few minutes, the shovel hit something solid. He froze, scraping away the soil until a small metallic object appeared. A key shaped like a rose stem, delicate yet old. She picked it up. It felt warm against her palm. Dominic looked at her eyes full of both hope and dread. "The cellar," he said quietly. "There's an old wine cellar beneath the west wing. It's been locked since before she died." They made their way back inside, down a narrow staircase hidden behind a panel of bookshelves. The air grew colder with every step. At the bottom, they found a heavy iron door. Dominic inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. The door opened, revealing a single lamp and shelves of wine covered in dust, but what caught their attention was a safe built into the stone wall. He opened it slowly. Inside were photographs, documents, and a flash drive. Too modern to belong to his mother, someone had been here long after she died. Dominic picked it up, sliding it into his pocket before either of them could speak. A faint sound echoed from above. Footsteps, slow, measured, then a voice. "Marcus, calm and cold, you never could leave things alone. Could you?" Dominic looked up, fury flashing across his face. "He's here," Isabella whispered. The next moment the lights went out. The cellar plunged into darkness. She heard Dominic move beside her, the faint metallic click of the safety on a gun being released. Then Marcus's voice closer. "Now you always thought she loved you more. That's why you couldn't let her rest." His tone was twisted with hate. Dominic shouted back, "You killed her because she found out what you did to the company. The stolen funds, the fake charities. You were the disgrace." Marcus laughed, and the sound echoed like a ghost's cry. "You still think this is about money? She ruined me by telling me the truth about you." Lightning flashed through the small window above. For an instant, Isabella saw Marcus standing at the top of the stairs, gun aimed down at them. Dominic pushed her aside. The gun fired. The bullet hit the metal door behind her, ricocheting into the dark. Before the second shot came, Dominic lunged forward, knocking Marcus off balance. They crashed together at the base of the stairs, the gun sliding away into the shadows. Isabella ran toward them, screaming Dominic's name. The brothers fought wild, desperate, every movement filled with years of hatred. Marcus struck Dominic across the face, but Dominic didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed his brother by the collar and slammed him against the wall, their faces inches apart. "You killed her," he shouted. Marcus spat blood and laughed. "You still don't get it. She wasn't your mother. She was mine. You were the mistake she loved more." The words hit like a blade. Dominic froze, horror and disbelief flooding his face. Marcus took advantage, pushing him back, trying to grab the gun, but Isabella reached it first. Her hands trembling, she pointed it at Marcus. "Stop," she cried. But Marcus turned toward her, rage twisting his features. "You don't have the courage," he sneered. Before she could speak, Dominic moved again, grabbing Marcus's arm. The gun went off, the sound deafening when the smoke cleared. Marcus lay still, his eyes open but lifeless. Dominic stood over him, breathing hard, blood dripping from his reopened wound. "It's over," she whispered. "Not yet," he said, looking at the flash drive, his voice low. "This will tell the rest of the story." Then he looked at her eyes filled with something raw and real. "Thank you for not running." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't leave you." He smiled faintly. "You already saved me." But deep down she knew this wasn't the end. The flash drive held the truth, and truth had a way of changing everything. Even love, the night after Marcus's death, hung over the mansion like a curse. Silence filled every corner of the halls, the kind that made every creak sound like a warning. Isabella sat beside Dominic on the couch, his wound freshly bandaged again, his face pale, but his eyes still burning with purpose. The flash drive lay between them on the table, small and ordinary, yet powerful enough to destroy everything that remained of the Hale name. She reached for his hand and whispered, "We should turn it into the police." Dominic shook his head. "Not yet. You don't understand, my mother died for this." He paused, voice low, almost trembling. "I need to know what was worth her life before anyone else does." He stood despite her protest, moving toward his office, the same one where she had once found his brother's threats. He inserted the flash drive into his computer. The screen came alive with encrypted files one by one, unlocking themselves as he typed commands, his fingers fast, steady, almost desperate. Then a video appeared, dated the week before Evelyn Hale's death. The image flickered, showing his mother sitting in the same office, her face pale but determined, her voice calm. "If you're watching this, Dominic, then he knows Marcus discovered the truth about the company, the money laundering, the stolen funds. He's using my name to hide everything. If I disappear, know that I never stopped loving you, and that the man who calls himself your brother will not rest until you are gone." The video froze. Dominic's expression shifted from shock to fury. His hands clenched into fists. He whispered, "She knew everything." Isabella touched his arm. "We can take this to the authorities. It's proof of everything he did." Dominic's jaw tightened. "No, it's not just about the money. This file mentions another name. Look." He opened a folder titled Project Hale. Inside were medical documents, photographs of women and children in hospitals. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the data. Genetic experiments, illegal trials, all funded under false charities. This was what she tried to expose, he murmured. It wasn't just theft, it was human life. He stared at the screen a long time, then whispered they were using the foundation to test on people in poverty. Isabella felt cold all over her stomach, twisting. "This is monstrous." Dominic nodded. "And now everyone will know." He began copying the files to a secure drive, but before it could finish, the lights flickered, then went out again. Not the storm this time. The backup generator hummed to life, but only dimly. Shadows moved outside the window, headlights cutting through the fog. "Someone's here," she said, her voice barely audible. Dominic looked toward the door. "Stay behind me," he said quietly, his voice steady, but his body tense. They heard engines outside, more than one, the sound of tires grinding against gravel, then doors slamming shut. Isabella felt panic rise. Who would come at this hour? Dominic moved to the hidden drawer beneath his desk and pulled out a gun, his expression calm but cold. "It's not over," he whispered. Marcus wasn't working alone. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Heavy, deliberate men's voices carried low but sharp through the walls. One shouted, "Check the east wing." Another answered, "Orders clear. Find the files and eliminate everyone in sight." Isabella's heart stopped. She turned to Dominic, eyes wide. He met her gaze, this time his voice soft and fierce. "Listen to me. No matter what happens, you run through the back tunnel that leads to the chapel. Promise me." She shook her head. "I won't leave you." He caught her face between his hands, his eyes filled with fire. "Promise me." Isabella, tears filled her eyes. "I promise." The sound of glass shattering cut through their words. A bullet shattered the mirror behind them. Dominic pulled her to the ground. "Stay down," he whispered. Gunshots echoed through the mansion. Chaos replacing silence. Furniture, splintered walls, cracked men shouted orders, the air thick with smoke and fear. Dominic fired once, twice, the noise deafening. She could hear his breathing, heavy, fast, but controlled. He was trained, she realized, and the thought terrified her even more. They crawled through the hidden door behind the bookshelf and into the dark passage that led beneath the house, the air damp, the floor stone. She could hear voices growing fainter behind them, Dominic limping, but determined. She supported him as they moved until they reached the end, where a wooden door led out into the old chapel, the small cross on the wall illuminated by moonlight filtering through cracked stained glass. For a moment, there was peace. He sank onto a bench, breathing hard. She knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his wound again. "We can't stay here. They'll find us soon." He looked up at her, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Not if I make them think we went another way." Before she could stop him, he pulled a small device from his pocket, a trigger connected to explosives hidden in the tunnel. "What are you doing?" she cried, his voice soft. Ending this once and for all, he pressed the trigger. The ground shook, the tunnel collapsing behind them, dust filling the air. She covered her face, coughing when it cleared. The tunnel was gone, sealed forever. He leaned back, exhausted, his voice fading. "Now they'll never find what's left." His eyes met hers, full of quiet pain and love. "I told you the truth wasn't buried now. It never will be." Isabella clutched his hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You can't die like this. Please." He smiled weakly. "Maybe I'm not dying. Maybe I'm finally free." His eyes closed and the chapel fell silent again. Outside in the distance, the first light of dawn broke through the fog, touching the ruins of the mansion. The house that once held lies, now holding only truth and memory. But somewhere deep beneath the rubble, the faint sound of footsteps echoed again, as if the story wasn't finished yet. The dawn was pale and silent, but the mansion no longer stood the same. The explosion had torn through its foundation, leaving only smoke and broken stone. Isabella woke with a gasp in the chapel, her head throbbing, dust in her hair and blood on her hands. She turned her gaze frantically. Dominic lay a few feet away, his face ghostly pale, his body still. She crawled to him, shaking him, begging him to open his eyes. But there was nothing. She pressed her ear against his chest, and for a moment thought she heard silence. Then faintly came a single heartbeat, weak but alive. She almost cried, from relief. She tore a strip from her dress and pressed it to his wound again, whispering over and over, "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." The fire had spread to the edges of the garden, the smoke curling through the cracked windows. She knew they had to move before the men returned, or the fire reached the chapel. She dragged him toward the back door, her strength coming from somewhere she didn't understand. She stumbled through the rain that had started to fall thin but cold. It washed the blood from her hands, but not from her memory. She half carried, half pulled him down the path until she reached the forest behind the estate, the same path that once led to the vineyards where she had first dreamed of freedom. Hours later, she reached a small abandoned caretaker's house, hidden among trees. She pushed the door open with her shoulder and laid him on the old couch. She tore open the wound again, cleaned it with trembling hands, whispering, "You're going to live, Dominic. You're not leaving me now." When she finally collapsed beside him, exhaustion claimed her, both of them breathing shallow in the dim light. When she woke, it was evening, and the world had gone quiet again. Dominic's eyes were open, faint but alive, his voice barely more than a breath. "You should have left me there." She shook her head. "I couldn't." He gave the ghost of a smile, then whispered, "The files, did you save them?" She looked down at her pocket, pulling out the flash drive covered in dirt and ash. "Yes, I kept it." He nodded weakly. "Keep it safe. That drive will bring them all down." Before she could respond, a sound outside made her freeze, the snap of a twig, the murmur of a voice. She moved to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to see two dark figures moving through the trees. One carried a flashlight, the other a weapon. Her blood ran cold. They were hunting survivors. She turned to Dominic. "We have to go." He tried to rise, but pain pulled him down. She gripped his arm. "We can't fight them. Not like this. We need help." "There's someone," he said, his voice shaking. "My mother had a friend, Dr. Lillian Cross. She knows everything. If she's still alive, she can protect you, not me." "Us," she corrected. But he shook his head. "No, I can't move fast enough. If they find us, you run. Promise me again." She shook her head, crying. "I won't leave you this time." He reached for her hand, his touch weak but firm. "If you die, then all of this means nothing." Live and finish what we started. A loud crash shattered the silence. The front door burst open. A man stepped in. Gun raised, his face hidden under a hood. Isabella grabbed the first thing she could, a rusted iron rod from beside the fireplace, and swung with all her strength. It connected with the man's arm. He shouted in pain, the gun dropping to the floor. She kicked it away, but before she could move, another figure appeared behind her, shoving her against the wall. The flash drive fell from her hand, sliding under the couch. The hooded man recovered. Raising his weapon again, Dominic forced himself up, staggering, his voice raw. "Leave her." The man hesitated just long enough for Dominic to grab a broken piece of wood from the table and strike. He didn't stop until the man dropped the gun again. Gasping, Dominic turned toward her, his body shaking. "Get the drive." She dropped to her knees, searching through the dust, her fingers closing around the metal just as another shot rang out. The bullet missed her by inches. Dominic stumbled backward, hit the wall and slid down, blood blooming across his shirt. Again she screamed, running to him. He tried to speak, but the words broke in his throat. The second man ran forward, grabbing the flash drive from her hand and sprinting into the woods. She chased him out into the rain, but he vanished into the darkness. When she returned, Dominic was barely breathing, his hand weakly reaching for hers, his voice almost gone. "Don't let them win. Find Lillian. Tell her I finished what Mother started." The light in his eyes dimmed, but she refused to believe he was gone. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering over and over, "I'll finish it. I swear I'll finish it." The rain fell harder, washing the blood from the floor. She looked at his still face, and for a moment, thought she saw him breathe again. But when she blinked, it was gone. She sat there holding his hand until dawn touched the sky again. The world felt empty and endless, and the only sound was the wind carrying her vow into the distance. The truth will rise, and when it does, they'll all fall. The world blurred into days and nights that felt the same. Isabella buried Dominic beneath the last standing oak tree on the edge of the estate where the sunlight touched first every morning. The ground was soft from rain, her hands raw from digging, but she didn't stop until the grave was perfect. She placed his mother's silver bracelet on top of the soil, the one he had given her, the one that had started it all. Then she whispered, "I'll finish what you began," and walked away from the ashes of their past. The flash drive was gone, but she remembered the name, Dr. Lillian Cross, Dominic's mother's friend, the one who might know the rest. She traveled for weeks, hiding under different names, taking trains and buses through small towns until she reached the coastal city. Written in the letters she found buried with the box there in a quiet clinic surrounded by ivy and stone, she found Lillian, gray-haired but sharp-eyed. The doctor froze when she saw the name Hale written on the envelope. Isabella handed her, "Come inside," the doctor said, her voice trembling. "I've waited for this for years." She poured tea, her hands shaking as she opened the letter. Inside was a single photograph. Dominic. As a boy standing beside his mother, Lillian looked at it for a long time, then said softly, "Evelyn came to me before she died. She told me if anything happened, the truth would come through her son." Isabella's voice broke. "He's gone." Lillian's eyes filled with sorrow, but she whispered, "Then it's your turn to finish what he couldn't." The doctor walked to a safe in the corner, unlocking it to reveal another drive identical to the one stolen. Dominic made a copy before giving the first to his brother. "I've kept it hidden all these years," she said. "He knew someone would try to destroy it." Isabella held the small device in her palm. It felt heavy with destiny. "What's on it?" she asked. The doctor met her eyes. "Proof," Lillian said. "Records of the human trials, the stolen funds, the deaths hidden under charity work. And one more thing, names of everyone involved. They went to the authorities together." At first, no one believed her until the evidence hit the press. The Hale Corporation, that once stood as a symbol of power and wealth, collapsed overnight. Names of senators, doctors, investors, all exposed. The scandal exploded across every screen. The world called it the redemption of the innocent, the fall of the Hales, but none of that brought Dominic back. Still, every time she saw his name cleared, every time the truth spread like light through darkness, she felt him there beside her, whispering, "You did it." She moved to the city, starting a small foundation under his name, the Hale Foundation for Truth and Healing. helping victims of corporate abuse, the same cause that had cost his mother her life. One rainy evening, months later, she stood by the ocean, the waves roaring beneath a silver sky. She wore no jewelry except the wedding ring he had placed on her finger at the altar. She whispered to the wind, "I thought I'd be safe because they said you couldn't love, but you loved deeper than anyone ever could." The rain fell hard. A voice behind her, soft, almost unreal, made her freeze. "Isabella." She turned slowly, her heart stopping. Dominic stood a few feet away, his face pale but alive, his arm in a sling, his eyes tired but filled with life. He took a step forward, rain dripping from his hair. How she whispered, unable to move. "I should have died," he said, "but someone found me. Lillian had a man watching the estate. She brought me to her clinic. I woke up 2 months later. She ran to him the moment his arms wrapped around her. She broke into sobs. He held her close, his voice low against her ear. "I told you the truth wouldn't stay buried." He pulled back enough to look at her face, tears mixing with rain. "You finished it, didn't you?" She nodded. "The world knows everything now." He smiled, then whispered, "Then maybe now we can finally start living." They walked along the shore hand in hand as the rain softened into mist. The world around them quiet again. Behind them the tide rose, washing away the footprints, until only 2 faint marks remained, side by side in the sand. The story that began with a lie ended with truth, and the man once said to be incapable of love had proved the entire world wrong. Not with words, not with power, but with the one thing that survived every storm, a heart that never stopped beating for her.